Hi there. Welcome back to the Reel Film Chronicles podcast. As always, I'm Nathan.
And I'm Brian.
And in this week's exciting episode, we're going to be taking a look at a little film called Spider-Man Across the Spiderverse.
Isn't that exciting? Man, Across the Spiderverse. Big sequel in the making for, 4 years? Did you go see the first Spider-Man? What was it called?
Into the Spider-Verse.
Into the Spiderverse. Thank you. Did you go see that in theaters when it came out years ago?
Absolutely. That was our Christmas Day movie that year, actually.
Right on. It did come out around Christmas, right?
Yes, it did, because that year there was no Star Wars film being released, which was our tradition for a couple of years. And that year we did Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I remember it like it was yesterday.
Right. I think I went to see it on New Year's Day of that holiday season. And maybe going in with like a little bit of hestation because we've just been through, Infinity War, Endgame, the superhero, like 20 plus movies of the MCU. We're in the thick of the DC universe. And here is Sony. I mean, I think Venom had already come out by then. So it's like Sony was going to do their own thing. They own the rights to Spider-Man and the whole Spider-Man universe. So what are they going to do? An animated movie. Okay. I mean, it just, in my mind, I'm thinking they're just looking to cash in on the Spider-Man name. And then I watch this movie and I walk out, I was like, what did I just see? That was like maybe the best superhero film I've seen in the past 10 years.
Yeah.
Like full stop. It was just amazing. And I watched it again a few weeks before watching the sequel, like in preparation. And I think the first time I saw Spider-Man was maybe 4.5 stars. And I was like, no, that's an easy 5-star movie. I just loved every second of it. And now we get a sequel. It was, I don't know, spoiler alert, it was amazing. I loved every second of this one as well. But yeah, you got to go see this one in the theater as well.
Yeah. We finally got good seats as well, like in Kingston, like the giant reclining seats.
Oh, yes.
It was a nice little surprise. But I took my son and I went to see this on the weekend. We were like you, I was absolutely blown away. I had high expectations from watching the first one, obviously. Like most people, I really loved that one. I think I gave it 4.5 out of 5.
Yeah.
But yeah, immensely high expectations, and I was still blown away by the second one. So much going on. There's so much to be said, and we're going to get into it about the animation style. I mean, the animation in this is it's highly stylized, but it's so amazing, and there's so many details going on in the background, and it's not just a gimmick. It's actually there to drive the story and drive like character growth as well. Like everything's so well integrated. The score, the visuals, the acting. I mean, if you're talking about in the past maybe 5 years or so, 6 years, 7 years, this is one of the best, if not the best, superhero movies. And it just goes to show, so often animation is dismissed as almost like juvenile, or it's a medium specifically for children's stories. But I think movies like Across the Spiderverse show the true power of that medium, that you can speak not just to children, but to the children in all of us. Here's a PG rated movie. I think it's PG. Or PG-13, but it's dealing with some very powerful themes, and it engages people whether you're 6 or 66. There's something in this movie. You can still be engaged by this, unless you have epilepsy, in which case you're probably out of luck.
Yeah, there's... Sorry, everyone. I want to reverse a little bit here and talk about your history with Spider-Man, because we have talked about different superhero movies.
Well, yeah, we went to college together. My first Kager was with Spider-Man. Oh, sorry. It's me and Peter go back a long ways. Yeah.
Yeah. You gotta be careful of the secret identities here.
Peter parked car.
Like in my mind. We talked about the Batman ages ago, and we talked about how much, we read Batman, all the different graphic novels and stuff. What about Spider-Man? How many Spider-Man comics have you read? How familiar are you with the Spider-Man mythos, like the different storylines that have happened over the past 60, 70 years since it's, I mean, that was 63 or 64, I think, the first Spider-Man.
Yeah, well, I mean, for full disclosure, out of the two of us, Brian is definitely the Spider-Man expert. I haven't read nearly as many Spider-Man comics as you. I grew up primarily, my fandom of Spider-Man started. We grew up watching reruns of the '60s Spider-Man cartoon,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's really what inspired me. That's really what started to ingrain Spider-Man in my consciousness. I think it was a '60s cartoon, but there was tons of reruns in the '80s when we grew up, and like I fell in love with like that version of the character. It's a very specific version of the character, but like that's what got me hooked to Spider-Man. And then growing up, I wasn't a huge comic book collector, but like when you're a kid, somehow like comic books will just materialize in your house at some point. I remember like and Spider-Man was one of those. I remember going to one. There was some event going on in town, and there was actually the police were handing out. There were Spider-Man comics, but it was Spider-Man. It was a Canadian Spider-Man comic, so Spider-Man was up in Canada. It was him and Ghost Rider, and they were like helping out the Toronto Blue Jays.
Yeah.
Saving them from some terror plot.
I know exactly what series you're talking about, because there was a series of them. Famous Spider-Man artist Todd McFarlane actually drew the cover of a few of those issues.
Really?
And there was one issue about the Edmonton Oilers and Spider-Man. And there was one in Calgary, Chaos in Calgary, if that was the name of that one. It was like, there were Canadian specific ones, and I have a whole bunch of copies of them for whatever reason, because it was just like, oh my goodness, Spider-Man is finally up in Canada. How exciting is that?
Yeah, and then like
us?
a lot of my knowledge comes. I read periodically comics and graphic novels, and then I was just being kind of having my toe dipped into the pop culture pool. I knew about stories like the cloning saga, and some of the other stories like the Venom kind of storyline and everything. So I'd read bits and pieces, and I know kind of general arcs and about some of the how they've done Peter dirty a couple times and kind of resetting his arc and having everybody forget who he was and breaking up his marriage and stuff and the back and forth. This movie I think pokes fun at it a little bit or takes issue with, which we'll get into a little bit later. How about you? Like, what was your introduction to Spider-Man? I know Spider-Man is like your number one superhero.
Well, that was the thing that I was curious just how much number one is, because I still have my comic book collection, and I actually over the past few months have been doing a proper inventory of every single one, logging them not just into a spreadsheet, and I love spreadsheets, but as like I need to go further, log it into a website that like pulls out all the information from each comic and puts it into a big list. And so of my collection, Spider-Man, of course, is the number one most appearances with Spider-Man in it. At 360 different issues of comics I have.
Oh, nice.
Spider-Man is in it. Number two in that list is Mary Jane Watson, of course. 271. I mean, J. Jonah Jameson is in like the top 5. Just, he's in there. But Batman is number 3 at 173 issues that have Batman in it. And then you have a bunch of X-Men and whatnot. But it was kind of neat to see just how much Spider-Man I was getting and how much I was spoiled by my parents buying me like every monthly Spider-Man comic for a long time. But I was collecting and growing up in the 90s with that clone saga, which I think burnt out everybody, even new readers of the series, right? So
it's not like, well received, right?
No,
if I recall correctly.
It was something else. And I think I stopped collecting Spider-Man comics in the late 90s, around 98 or 99. And I just never really got into them. And I think we mentioned in the Batman episode, I have a lot of Batman graphic novels on my shelf.
Yeah.
And I still read them every so often. I don't have any Spider-Man comics like in graphic novel form or like trade. Well, okay, I have a couple, but like not nearly as many as Batman's. It's not a comic series I've gone back to. And I'm only vaguely aware of the past now 22 years of Spider-Man history where, it's just like they nullify the marriage. There's like a contract with Mephisto. There's all this different stuff. But I'm only picking up on because of potential tie-ins to different movies, like when Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness was coming out. Sorry, not Multiverse of Madness. Doctor Strange appearance
No Way Home.
in No Way Home.
Yeah.
Where Doctor Strange was doing this is like, oh, maybe that's actually he's making a deal with Mephisto, like who I think is kind of like the Marvel equivalent of Satan, who has powers to like.
Essentially, he's the devil in the Marvel universe. Yeah.
You're right. And you're like, oh, they actually, spoiler, like they went safe with just like Doctor Strange putting that in. But there's all sorts of interesting stories there of Spider-Man, and I'm not that familiar with them. But really, what happened around the time I stopped collecting, 2001, we got Sam Raimi, Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst in a Spider-Man movie that was unlike anything we had really ever seen before. And I think, along with X-Men and some of the other smaller
Blade.
superhero films at the time. I was going to say Blade.
It was a bit before that, yeah.
Blade was a bit before that. Blade was successful and opened the way for X-Men, I think. I think that's kind of how it went. And Spider-Man was just like, all right, that movie made gangbusters at the box office. And they're like, that, to me, launched the entire the entire comic cinema world.
I think the rest is history, right? You had that Spider-Man movie come out, Sam Raimi Spider-Man, with Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst, James Franco, and I think everything, you're absolutely 100% right. X-Men was solid, but really Spider-Man had the built-in fan base. The movie was amazing, and that's really like the reason we have the MCU, the reason we had Nolan's Batman films, the reason we had DCEU was because Spider-Man. I think Spider-Man really was the beginning. Love it or hate it, was the beginning of the.
Who hates that Spider-Man movie?
I mean, no. I mean, comic book movies in general. The dominance of comic book movies. If you love it or if you hate it, I think you really have to go back to essentially Spider-Man. Was it 2000, 2001? When was that? When that first?
2001. Yeah,
2001. That was the catalyst for everything we've seen today. Like if you're looking for a breaking off point for the multiverse, like that was a key canon event, maybe we'll call it.
Yeah, that ties it perfectly into this whole thing. Man, oh man. And we've had a lot of Spider-Man movies and a lot of ups and downs with that series. And to get I mean, we have these conversations before about like Spider-Man showing up in the MCU, and they really tried to set him apart from the previous Spider-Man entries. It wasn't so much of an origin story in that first appearance, like his first movie, Homecoming,
Civil War.
It was
the first appearance in the MCU, but his first movie, Homecoming. You're correct. Sorry,
I
cut you off too fast.
Even at that time, I was like, this doesn't feel like my Spider-Man, but I understand that this is I've aged out of that that world in some way, and it's like we need different Spider-Man for different people. And what better
sort of though, right? Because even though the new Miles Morales and Spider-Gwen and Across the Spiderverse, that's from another generation, younger generation too. But I felt like I connected with them in a way that I didn't necessarily connect with the Tom Holland version in the MCU, right?
And I wonder if a part of that is because they are new characters, right? That is Peter Parker in the MCU. That we've seen the Raimi version, we've seen the Amazing Spider-Man version. I can't remember the director, Mark Webb, I think, of those two movies.
Yeah.
And it's just it was the same person but different tellings. And now we have, I mean, that's the central theme of the first Spider-Man movie here, Into the Spider-Verse, was new characters that are Spider-Man with slightly different stories can be really compelling and interesting. And I think maybe that's why we latch onto a bit more than we have with the Tom Holland Spider-Man, who I think overall, I kind of liked that. It was kind of like a trilogy of origin story there. Spoiler alert for No Way Home, the aunt dies in that case, and you're like, oh, I see what they are doing now. Instead of Uncle Ben dying, it's Aunt May who's going to pass and be his canon event to go forward and be the Spider-Man that we're all familiar with.
Maybe a little too familiar. I don't know if it's about familiarity. I'm sure there are great Peter Parker stories to tell out there. But I think maybe one of the great things about Into the Spider-Verse, if we could talk about overall themes for Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse, Into the Spider-Verse really interrogated, I think, a question of who gets to be a hero or who can be a hero. Mm-hmm. And then Across the Spider-Verse was really exploring that idea of what it means to be a hero and how do you be a hero, right? Yeah. And how do you find that balance? And I think the moral quandary at the center of the movie's conflict, when it gets down to it, is really boils down to what makes Spider-Man different from other superheroes and what makes him so compelling. There's obviously that idea. It's a great thing now that it's so ingrained in popular culture. I have it coming up in like corporate meetings where people will talk about this. With great power comes great responsibility, right? It's so ingrained. It's going to be up there like in 100 years, you're going to have like quoting Confucius and Aristotle and Uncle Ben, I think. I'm not being hyperbolic, I don't think, because I think it's such a simple and powerful philosophical statement. I think people are seeing the power of that just because it came from a comic book, which has traditionally not been looked at as a very adult or mature medium to tell stories. But I think where people are seeing is like, oh, there actually is value and there are some important lessons to take. And I think the same thing with Into the Spider-Verse and now Across the Spiderverse, and hopefully with Beyond the Spider-Verse, the sequel coming out in a couple years, that you see is like, oh yeah, there are, it's a big, fun, action-packed movie that kids and adults can enjoy vicariously, but it's also exploring these really powerful themes that I think are going to be important, just as important to kids as with great power comes great responsibility. There's going to be these other themes about, who gets to wear the mask. I think it's incredibly important, going from Peter Parker, who is in the comics, he was white, he was a white man. And now you have, Miles Morales, who is black and I think Puerto Rican descent. Spider-Gwen is a woman. So like, really, it's these more modern concerns where it feels like really advancing that conversation in terms of cultural progress as well. I think those kind of things can't be overlooked at how important those issues are as well.
Without a doubt, it's like that was such a big takeaway from the first one, especially is like anyone can be there, and I don't know if this is one of those like Stan Lee things where he was able to like retroactively put stuff on the character that maybe wasn't there because they were just making comics. It was a little more simple back in the 60s, right? But it's like the full face mask, the full suit. Every kid could picture themselves behind the mask, right? But in reality, it was always Peter Parker and he was always a white guy. And I think in especially recent conversations, it's like you can't just change the race or background of these characters. You have to create new relevant characters that are there for everybody, that are there for minority people, that are there for different cultures and ethnicities. It's like, here's this perfect example where I think they probably saw it in the comics where it's like, well, we need another Spider-Man. And it's like, what better way to do it than this? And it just launches like this entire Spider-Verse thing that is so fascinating. And I'm sure, I don't know if this was like a short comic series originally that like spawned all these different spider people or not, but it's like, there's so much wealth. I mean, you see in the scenes here, like all the spider people that are showing up is like all of them are from one of these comics. It was really neat, but like that was a huge takeaway for the first one. It almost made me teary eyed when I was watching it again. It was just like this is so significant to have such a piece of like art, this movie that is so good on so many levels that works for so many people who get to experience Spider-Man in a way that I got to as a kid, because, as this white guy, white boy as a child, everything was for me, right?
All the heroes were white. Yeah. You saw yourself reflected in everything. Yeah,
exactly. And it's like, now I'm getting emotional thinking everyone can share in this now. And we have awesome characters on there that are doing their thing. And it's so fantastic. It was such a great, I don't know. It was just really nice to see.
Well, I like that idea. Like that, not necessarily everybody can be Spider-Man, but everybody can be a hero, right? I think that's the main takeaway. Is like anybody can. Like the main strength of Spider-Man is that he does the right thing, right? That he has that moral center, and that's the important thing in these movies too. Is that what makes Spider-Man isn't necessarily that he has the powers. Like that's part of it in the literal context of the movie, but like the real thing is he does what's right? He tries to save everybody, and honestly, after watching these two movies, Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse, honestly, like, I'm feeling like more and more like Miles Morales is like the Spider-Man now. Like Peter Parker feels like it almost feels like the torch has been passed. I mean, going forward, it's almost weird now. We're gonna go back to live action and see Peter Parker again. It's like I almost prefer Miles Morales. Feels like our Spider-Man now, right? It's like it's weird. It's powerful. Like it's a testament to the strength of the storytelling in these movies, I think, as well. That he's really like they're establishing this character. It's like, this is the Spider-Man, you know?
And I want to see it. I want to see the live action Miles Morales in the MCU if they go down that road. It's like we can,
It's,
Peter Parker Spider-Man has had his time in these movies, and what better way to go forward? And especially they're doing this with a lot of the other characters. Like I can't think of one. Like Captain America, an example where Steve Rogers passing on the torch, and it's like boom, Peter Parker here. Especially so relevant for live action movies where the actors may age out of the films, or it's just like you get tired of making them after 10 or 15 years. And it's like Tom Holland was brought in to play Spider-Man as a teenager. I want to say like 7 or 8 years ago, maybe, right? It's just like, he may not want to do this forever. And I do think he's a decent Spider-Man, and he has good presence on screen for that. But there's so many opportunities to have different Spider-Men and people in the MCU.
The Uncharted franchise needs Tom Holland now. They need his help.
Yeah, that's right.
They need him to carry that forward. It's going to fall apart without Tom Holland.
It was also kind of funny in Uncharted where there's a few stunts and stuff where it's just like, oh, that looks like this, like the Peter Parker 3D model from Spider-Man, like in this movie, like doing some of the moves. You know what I mean? It was just like, I couldn't differentiate that in my mind. It's like, no, that's still Spider-Man in Uncharted.
Well, we're running out of budget, sir, on the Uncharted movie. It's like, well, I'll just throw in some Spider-Man models, but Nathan Drake is an entirely different. Shut up. Put Spider-Man in the movie. Just change his clothes.
Across the Spiderverse, though, I mean, 140 minutes. This movie, I believe I saw in the trivia, this is the longest American animated movie ever made so far. But that time flew by so quick. This movie is packed to the gills.
Didn't feel it at all.
And, I think we might have said before, but we're going to talk full spoilers as we normally do here.
Yeah.
The gall, the balls, the gumption to end this movie. Yeah, to end the movie on like a cliffhanger. I was not expecting a cliffhanger ending. Were you?
This is where this is my only problem I had with this movie is if you look at, to me, like the best of the best kind of middle chapters, like Empire Strikes Back, The Dark Knight, they feel like fully contained stories with a rising action climax and some kind of falling action or denouement while leading seamlessly into the next entry. And for me, Across the Spiderverse, it's just like it had rising action, but no climax and no denouement. It doesn't feel like it stands on its own. That's the only real criticism I'm going to have to level against this movie. Otherwise, I would have given it 5 out of 5, spoiler alerts. But like this movie just doesn't feel self-contained, even compared to something similar in the MCU like Infinity War. Infinity War felt like it had at least, it was going to continue, right? There was going to be another movie, but it felt self-contained in a way that Across the Spider-Verse didn't feel. And that's maybe a minor nitpick, but to me, I think that's, I don't know if it's a pacing issue, because like in the background, hearing stories about how it was originally supposed to be one movie, but it kept getting bigger and bigger until they had to split it into 2. And if that's true, then it really, really shows to the movie's detriment. It's not a terrible thing. It doesn't ruin the movie. Still love the movie. But to me, it didn't work in the way that something like Empire Strikes Back or The Dark Knight really worked, as you could watch those movies and you'd feel like you watched a complete story or episode, to use Star Wars terms. And this one, it feels like it's almost like a 2-parter in a TV series where you have to watch both episodes together to get the full story. And for me personally, that's just my own personal preference. It leaves it feeling incomplete instead of, I'm excited to see the next movie now, but it's like Across the Spider-Verse and Beyond the Spider-Verse to me are going to form one story or one complete movie. And I don't know, something about that just rubs me the wrong way a little bit. That's just me personally. I know other people don't care as much. Other people maybe care more. I'm probably kind of somewhere in the middle. But it didn't really work for me. In the cliffhanger, the way they, not the fact that it was a cliffhanger, but the way they implemented that cliffhanger, I think.
Yeah, and I do agree. I remember seeing the cliffhanger in the theater, and I was just like, wow, like that. It did feel a little jarring. It's just like I needed a little more closure to this movie's story.
A little bit more. Although like that reveal where he was in the wrong universe, I was like, oh my God, like they play that so perfectly. I think looking back, somebody online was saying like, oh, on the screen you can see Universe 42 when he's powering up that interdimensional travel device. And they're like, but the reveal is like, who's Spider-Man? It's like, oh my God, mind blown. I can't believe like it was done as one of those rug pulls that was just done so well. And I was like, that kudos to the filmmakers. That was, yeah, that got me. That was one of those like, like
Right.
sucking my breath moments. It's like, oh my God, things are not as they seem.
That's the level of detail too that warrants multiple viewings of the movie. And I need this movie to come out on physical media like ASAP so I can watch it again. And I don't really want to spend all my time on YouTube videos. It's like, here's the 87 Easter eggs you missed in this movie. You know what I mean?
It's more fun finding yourself, especially in that the spider headquarters there with all the different spider people from different spider dimensions, and there's so many Easter eggs and stuff going on. I don't know how many were from the comics. I recognize a couple that I knew had comic book origins. I don't know how many were like just made up specifically for this movie, or if there's just so many different comics with different like T-Rex Spider-Man and stuff.
I believe every speaking role, like speaking spider person, has a comic or a comic series after them. And then there's a lot of like one-offs. No speaking role. It's just like these might have just been like weird concepts. There's a lot of throw out to different mediums as well.
Oh yeah, did you see the PS4 Spider-Man was in there even?
I didn't see it because I've never really played the Spider-Man movie on PlayStation.
And then you had obviously the clips from Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, and then Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, the Amazing Spider-Man. That was pretty cool to see that. You had the bad guy in this, the Spot, show up in the Venom universe.
Yes.
For that one little scene. There was just so many. And then, unfortunately, Donald Glover is not going to be live action Miles Morales because he's live action Prowler.
Yeah.
Amazing.
That was a really nice touch. It's just like, he was in the MCU. That pulls back in there, and he was in here. It was just, there's so many Spider-Man and so many recognizable things. Like, it was just an overload. And you almost need to see him. You have to see it multiple times, but
you have to
for the little Easter eggs, but also for the little plot details. Exactly as like Universe 42 is just these little things that you're going to pick up on later on throughout the movie. And that's what, going back to your point earlier, is like this movie can be appreciated by all ages. It's like, I could just imagine a kid watching this being overwhelmed with like the action and everything on screen. I'm overwhelmed as an adult, like piecing together like all the characters and things that are happening, the little plot lines that are going on, all the little jokes that happen. There's so much happening.
Yeah, and for my joke about epilepsy earlier, not at the expense of epileptics, but the expense of the frenetic kind of nature of some of the scenes. Mm-hmm. Despite that, like the action, I found really like it was super easy to follow. I could see exactly what was going on the screen, even though there was so much going on. Such clear direction. There were quick cuts, but it felt like it wasn't like that joke online of like Taken 2 or Taken 3 where there's like 20 cuts to get through one like action beat. Like there were lots of quick cuts, but it's like it felt like it held long enough. I could actually, my brain had time to process the action. I could follow clear directionality, even though there was so much crazy stuff going on the screen.
Yeah.
The animation style again was amazing. Like I don't know, like for kids watching this, it's awesome. For adults watching this, it's awesome.
We got to talk about the animation here because it's such a significant part of it. And this is the thing. So I mentioned previously on different episodes that I'm playing catch up for the Box Office Mojo Top 100 grossing movies of all time. And there's a lot of movies I missed out on, like the Illumination series of like Minions and Despicable Me.
Yeah.
And so I'm watching a lot of these like older, like in the past 10, 15 years, CG animated movies, and like they have a specific art style, and just it's like it fits the needs of the movie. But here you have this animated movie where the animation style like advances the story, like it serves so many purposes, like it's varied. It doesn't just serve like, it's not just one style the entire time, right? Like you have different style because you're converging multiple universes here, and you think, well, how everyone's just going to look the same in some way. And that's kind of like the thing in Multiverse of Madness. I'll go back to that one where they go through a few universes. And the most interesting ones are the montage of like the Paint universe, right?
Oh yeah.
But they can't do it for the whole movie. And here they're in a universe and every character has a different animation style. And it all fits together so well. Even that scene where you say the Spot went into the Venom universe, that's all live action except for Spot is animated. And it just works. Donald Glover showing up as the Prowler. He's in this cage. He's live action in an animated world, and it just absolutely works. They blended it all together so well.
Yeah, I think people pointed out, like, with Gwen Stacy or Spider Gwen, like in her universe, it's almost
Spider
like
Woman.
Spider Woman. Yeah, I know. But Spider Gwen is the colloquialism. She's actually, isn't it Ghost Spider is her actual name? Brian?
I don't know. I was
Come
told it
on.
was Spider Woman.
Out nerd each other.
I don't know.
But yeah, in her world, it's kind of like almost like kind of watercolor.
It's all watercolors, yeah.
And
it's beautiful.
And it feels like the colors almost changing in terms of her mood and specifically her relationship with her dad, which is like an overarching theme. The idea of that relationship between family and kids specifically growing up. And having to make their own way in life, and how that changes the relationship with parents, which as a kid watching that, I think it's powerful, but also as an adult, and especially a parent watching that, it's like from the other side, that's really powerful. I think the animation style does so much to reinforce those themes.
Yeah.
You look at something like Spider-Punk and his animation style, it feels like almost like newspaper clippings and stuff. It feels very kind of chaotic and anarchistic, which perfectly fit the character. It was pretty amazing. Ben Reilly there, his animation style it was almost like a 90s aesthetic.
Well, that was the thing. Like, he looked like he came out of the pages of those 90s comics. And Spider-Punk, and I don't mean to derail you here, but I got to talk about Spider-Punk.
But you did!
For a minute, right? Where it looks like cutouts, right? Like pasted together. And they definitely reminded me of... like, my sister was into the punk scene, like back in the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
And all the posters, like promotional flyers, all looked like that, right?
Oh, they all look like, yeah.
Especially that it's like a UK punk scene, which I think was significantly like bigger and more prominent and like culturally there than it was to us when we were like 10 or 15-year-olds here in Canada. But it's like getting a taste of that is like I recognize so much of that. And the technical part of the animation there, which we probably know too much about or not enough. We know enough to talk nonsense after watching like those visual artists react to videos on YouTube.
Shout out to Corridor Crew.
Right? It's like they point out in the first Spider-Man, different characters like Miles is animated at different frames per second. So there's 24 frames in a film a second, right?
Yeah.
But in animation, it's often done on 2s or 4s, where if it's done on 2s, that's 12 frames of animation per 24, and you can go further down and down. And in Spider-Punk's situation here, different parts of his character were animated at different rates. So, and I think I wrote it down here, but I might have lost it. His body is on 8s or 12s. His guitar was on 4s, so you have about 6 images of his guitar moving per 24 frames. And his outline was different than his body, and it was animated on 2s or even 1s for a full 24 frames per second of animation.
Insane.
And it brings together like that. And in my mind, I'm like, how could you just have so much technical stuff going on? But it just absolutely works, and you see it, and you may not even register what you're seeing, but you think about it afterwards, and it plays into the character of these people, like the Spider-Punk, like you said, the chaoticness of it.
Also, shout out to Daniel Kaluuya, who voiced Spider-Punk.
Yeah.
All the voice actors.
Awesome.
We're going to mention a couple more. Daniel Kaluuya killed it. I think this is the first time we've seen him do his actual natural accent. He's been allowed to have his natural British accent in a major Hollywood blockbuster.
Possibly, right?
But it's great. But yeah, the animation style really helped to tell the story. I think that was like so many amazing details. It felt like a comic book come to life. Like you could actually see, like I was looking at Miles Morales and the animation on him, and you could see like the little dots as though it were like a comic book, like the actual ink kind of blown up to full screen. This literally, it felt like a comic book literally come to life. There were even like, and when it went to like the split panels for a couple scenes, I was like, oh my God, I just had a huge smile on my face. Like I felt like a kid again. There were so many scenes in this. My son and I, we turned to each other and we just like smile or we'd laugh. Like it was an amazing experience to watch this. The technical achievement, the voice acting, the story was touching as well. There was the ongoing. I love the way they had the relationship between Miles Morales and Gwen Stacy, where they obviously, Miles Morales is pining for Gwen, and Gwen obviously has feelings for Miles, but they both feel like they're fully fleshed characters with their own inner lives, their own motivations, their own triumphs and tragedies, their own strengths and faults, and there was no like none of the standard like romantic cliches. I felt like there was like they built that kind of romantic tension without it being the focus for either character, which is really refreshing. If they do hook up in the last movie, that's going to be one of those moments where they kind of cheer. But like the movie's like it's not the central. It's not the central part of the movie. There's no damsel in distress. There's no like. It seems almost like it's very, very realistic, where it's like an equal. They feel like real people with real lives. I thought that like that was so amazing. There was a scene that everybody's talking about where Miles and Gwen are sitting upside down on that building, looking at the New York skyline upside down, and it's like it's such a like simple conception of a shot, but the way they pull it off is like. Oh my God. It's like, you could look at that. You could just like, I think you had said, you sent me a message that like every frame is like a painting in this thing where you could like essentially extract this. I don't know. Maybe it's online, but it's like, you could take that image of them sitting upside down, looking at that. Oh yeah. It was just little touches where before she goes upside down, Gwen ties her hair up. So it doesn't like just like, these are like exactly things that real people would do in the real world. If you had hair, of course you're going to tie it so it's not like hanging it down your face or something, right? It's like so much attention to detail. It just like there were scenes that just it blew my mind. It really did.
Without a doubt. And the animation, the time that went into this movie took 4 years to produce. And unfortunately, I've seen in the news recently that a lot of like sort of long crunch time, a lot of like an entire year of like 10, 11 hour days plus like just thankless work for all the animators. A lot of animators left the project because of their sort of the working conditions. I don't know the validity of it. I imagine it's true based on everything else we've heard about from other industries, especially like the video game crunch time of like spending months to get a product ready.
Yeah.
And it makes me worry because I looked up, it's like, oh, first thing I do when I finish this movie is look up, when's the sequel coming? It said March 30th, 2024. It's less than a year away, and it's like, no.
I don't think that's going to happen.
I think one of the animators came out and said, no, you expect this in like 3 or 4 years' time. Because
they said they haven't even started yet. They were because they were so far behind on this one because of production delays. I don't know to what like Lord and Miller, who were the executive producers on this. Again, we're not here to spread rumors. This is simply like there were interviews. I think the one I was reading was it from Vulture maybe, but there was like 5 different employees who had left, and they were complaining about like at one point like they had artists sitting idle for 6 months apparently while they're figuring their stuff out. Not just Lord and Miller, but like the production company. I don't know the whole drama behind it, but I think it's important. There's a human cost to this, and I feel like part of me felt a little guilty. It's like, oh, there was so much kind of drama and so much pressure on these animators in the back end. I mean, like it's great that this movie came out and is going to be not just a box office smash, but it's going to be so affecting and so powerful for so many different people, like we've talked about before. But like at the same time, we have to think about the mental health of the people involved in making this, the actual animators I'm talking about, not just the writers and the actors who are important, but in the medium of animation, the animators are really like, this is their show and it's their achievement. And, the kind of working conditions, if that was the case, that's kind of unacceptable. And I know there's been a push in reading some of those articles there's been a push for animators to unionize in the same way that the writers are unionized. So hopefully in the future we're gonna be able to have these amazing movies, but also balance that out with better working conditions for the people who are bringing us these amazing stories.
Yeah, and it's not to get away from that element there, but I when I was a kid, I kind of remember like Disney movies, like hand animated Disney movies, taking a very long time to put together, and it's like they would invest all the time on the little details of the movie, and that's really one of the reasons why they live forever.
Oh yeah,
is that it's so much care is given to them, and that's something we haven't seen even in recent Pixar movies. Is that they feel almost like mass produced now. Like Pixar movies have kind of lost that magic, and like a studio will have a specific style to all their movies. They all look the same. And maybe they're reusing assets, maybe they're cutting corners here and there with like their whatever tools they use to animate their movie. And then something like this comes along and you're like, oh, this took 3, 4, 5 years to make, and it's like the like the attention of hundreds of animators, and it's like, even though it's CG, like they are hand touching like every frame of this movie because it's so important to the overall film. And I really, yeah, I think because of that, this movie lasts forever because of that. It's like the animation styles are representative of like different decades and stuff, but like it's so stylized that, I mean, this will never look bad. 50, 60 years. It's like the CG doesn't look dated. It'll just never happen for this film. Mark my words.
Mark them. No, like there is a timelessness to this, and you can tell, like the animators, they put in so much care, so much effort. Like it's a monumental feat. It's amazing.
Even to have like the story and the character, like the themes and the voice acting too. I mean, you're gonna start throwing at voice actors. The movie's stacked top to bottom.
Yeah.
And I wanted to touch on sort of the main like villain antagonist of the movie, Spider-Man 2099, voiced by Oscar Isaac, no less. Like I think this guy's one of the best actors in working right now, and his voice work was phenomenal. I love that they call him. It's like he's the only Spider-Man that doesn't like have humor. Like that's a humor, and I loved that his motivations made so much sense. That it's just like, oh, there are canon events. We have to protect the timelines.
Because if you don't protect the timelines, then if you save one person, you potentially risk that entire universe collapsing and billions, if not trillions, of people dying. So it's this idea of, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one or the few. So he's not a frothing at the mouth villain. It's almost like the who is it? The Time Cops there from the Loki TV show there. What's the name of that organization?
Owen Wilson and his,
Owen Wilson and the Time Cops, I think that's called, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, it's like, okay, there's a clear, I didn't agree with him in the movie, but he wasn't a frothing at the mouth villain. He had a personal connection where he had slipped into a universe where one of his alternate selves had died, and he had taken over that family. But because he made some changes, it caused some kind of he was an anomaly in that universe, which caused a breakdown in that universe, which caused the entire universe to collapse in on itself. And so he feels the weight and the guilt of that, and he's trying to prevent that. So his motivations are pure.
Isn't that great that you don't have to agree with the villain and like you can still empathize with them? It's just like he's not a super like bad person.
Yeah, I mean, you take one of the criticisms leveled rightly so against the Marvel. Most of the Marvel and DC movies are like, oh, the villain is just a frothing at the mouth bad guy. And then to have somebody who's nuanced like this, who's like, everyone in this movie, all the spider people believe that they're doing the right thing. And to some degree, you could come on either side of this debate and you wouldn't be entirely right and you wouldn't be entirely wrong. Yeah. Like Miles wants to save his dad, but by saving his dad, it's revealed that because he's gonna, like, there's a captain who dies in everybody's life and all the Spider-Man. It's a great little nod to the comic canon as well, right? Canon events, but also throwing shade at the fact that, like, oh, why does Spider-Man also always have to have this tragedy and always have to be miserable all the time? And then there's like, oh, the central theme of it was Miles Morales was like, oh, I'm tired of people telling me how my story is supposed to go. You're telling me that I can't save my own dad and without destroying the universe, and I'm like, well, no, I'm gonna try to save. That's what I do. I'm Spider-Man. I'm gonna try and save people. And I think what you're doing is wrong. And I came out more on his side with I think you're supposed to empathize more with him because he's a point of view character, but he's not. But he's also not entirely right. He's not entirely right either, right? It's like, oh yeah, but like, if it were me in that position, I kept thinking like, oh yeah, you can't stop me from saving my dad. I'm gonna go save my dad.
Based on the evidence that he's shown with like all these graphics of like these universes collapsing upon themselves and the events that happened in like the Spider-Man India universe, which was also so neat, and like the animation there was awesome. I loved the way that character was moving, and I think there was a lot of inspiration drawn from like the Indian culture and like different ancestry there of like, I don't want to say it was like a martial arts or something. I'm speaking out of
like Bollywood, Tollywood kind of thing. Like,
but it was fantastic. And I think,
well, I was reading online, a lot of Indian people like really appreciated like the care they like paid, or the attention they paid to specific elements of Indian culture.
That's right.
Like the whole discussion of like chai tea and naan bread. It's like you're
Yeah.
saying tea. It's like
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of positive feedback online, which is really great. Like you said it before, one of the ideas of inclusiveness, cultural inclusiveness, is a key part of this narrative, right?
Yeah. And so based with like that video evidence he's seen of like that universe is now having problems because Miles saved this family that was supposed to die. And he's just like, still no. He's just like, you can't tell me not to go save people. Like,
Yeah.
what do you do in that situation? Because there's definitely, it hints at like a different perspective out there where maybe Spider-Man 29, that is his experience, right? And that doesn't mean it applies everywhere. But all the other Spider-Man are kind of like taken into it is just like, oh, this is how everything is supposed to happen. And I do like that none of them are supposed to know this is happening, right? Like they don't recruit Miles before. They recruit Gwen, I think maybe too early, or was it because her father? No, her Peter Parker died. That was her canon like trauma event, right?
Yeah.
And so then she was able to be recruited into like the Spider-Verse, Legion of Spider folk, I guess.
Legion of Spiders.
Right?
Owen Wilson and the Time Hoppers. Yeah, whatever it was. Oscar Isaac and the Spider-Verse, yeah.
I must say, I do have the very first issue of Spider-Man 2099.
Yeah.
I didn't not really get into it. There was a whole 2099 series, I think back in 1993. It was Doom, X-Men 2099, Punisher. There's a whole bunch of them. I have almost all of them, and I just never really got into the series. So what I saw was like Spider-Man 2099 is going to be a big part of this. Be like, I really missed my opportunity to like read all those comics back then.
It was pretty cool. And then like, yeah, that whole escape sequence from the
my God, that thing
Spider League.
Insane.
And then showing like, oh yeah, Miles has really grown up since the last time. It's like he's starting to control his powers and just show like how much of a badass that Miles Morales actually is when he has his like when he actually does his like his energy sapping / and like spider zap power. I don't know what it's called in the comics, but when he does that, it's like you can see, it's like, oh, this is why this guy is. This is why they were afraid to tell him. This is why they wanted to lock him up right away. It's like, okay, he's taking names and kicking butt all over town. Even like Spider-Man 2099 gets him, and he's like, I felt that when he was pounding him into the train during that chase sequence, and he was like pounding him into the metal of this train. I felt like, oh, he's a little 15-year. He's a 15-year-old kid, but he's still Spider-Man. But it's like, I felt that. It's like, oh, he's really laying into this guy. It's like, okay, Spider-Man 2099 is not playing around anymore. Like he's gonna do like whatever he has to stop Miles Morales. And Miles Morales gives a speech there about, how the whole idea was that he was an anomaly. He wasn't supposed to be Spider-Man. It was that spider from another dimension. And it was like even among spider people where he thought he would find belonging, and he's still anomaly. He's still the outsider, and he's still having people tell him, it's like, oh, you don't belong. And he's like, no, man, I know who I am. I'm Spider-Man. You're not going to tell me any different. I know who I am. I know what my purpose is. I'm going to write my own story. And like I had like chills as he was giving that little speech on the train, and when he makes his escape back to headquarters, and Spider Bite, the holographic, or I don't know, is it a hologram? I don't know what it technically is, but that
like an
Spider
avatar,
character,
like
it was like a weird avatar. Not a weird. That was a pretty cool character for the limited screen time she got. She did really well. That whole thing, like that whole escape sequence, the whole kind of central conflict between all the spider people, it fit in well with the themes of the MCU, what they've been doing, but it also just fit with this idea of Spider-Man as like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do what I believe is right. I'm gonna fight back no matter how hard you hit me. I'm gonna get back up, and I'm gonna keep fighting, even though like other versions of me may seem to have lost their way, and people keep telling me I don't belong. I'm still going to get up, and I'm still going to fight. And that whole idea too, it was so powerful, that theme of family, right? Where he gets his strength from his parents, and to see that loving relationship, which is so often overlooked in movies, I think, but to see where he gets his strength from his family, where at the beginning, like his parents are angry with him because like he's out all the time being Spider-Man, and he's neglecting his studies and his work-life balance kind of thing. And they ground him, but they don't ground him because they hate him. They ground him because they love him. They want to try and get him better. Because like when Spider-Gwen shows up, and they're having a little moment up there, and his mom kind of how does she put it? Ice his game or something.
Yeah.
She scares him off, and she realizes like, oh, they're young, they're in love. Is like, you know what, you're grounded, but like tonight, go chase after her, because like she was young too. It's like, so there's that loving relationship. It's like, you know what, like, and that whole speech that she gives about like, you know, you were a little boy, now you're growing up. Can you promise me one thing? Will you look after that little boy now? Meaning Miles looking after himself, right? Taking care of his own kind of emotional and mental needs, but looking out for himself the way his parents looked out for him. So essentially what she's asking is like, take the lessons we've taught you and use those to go forward. And I think that was such a powerful message, and you can see the love between the families. And I'm getting chills thinking about these positive portrayal. It's such a simple thing, that positive portrayal of family interaction. And it's like, and that was at the heart of the movie. That was at the heart of the conflict too, where it's like, I'm going to do right by my parents, right? Not just because they're my parents, but because these are the values that they instilled in me, this idea of right and wrong. And he's going to carry that with him no matter what. That was so powerful. And I think that was such a positive message that whether you're, again, 6 or 66, 9 or 99, 10 or 10,000, whatever age you happen to be in this universe or any other universe, such a powerful message, and why this movie is so engaging.
Without a doubt. Well said.
Yeah.
Before we jump into ratings, I want to talk about the other villain of the movie, which
Yes,
we haven't mentioned at all,
100%.
is Spot.
The Spots.
The Spot, voiced by Jason Schwartzman, who
Such a good performance too.
Yeah, it's a great performance. I love the transition of, like, he's just sort of like an afterthought at first, right?
Goofy villain of the week, and they even say that. And it becomes this really credible threat. I was like, oh my God, like they did so well. It's like, oh yeah, he's goofy. Can't even steal an ATM at the beginning. And at the end, he's like a multiversal being threatening life as we know it. And it was credible. It was amazing.
And to juxtapose the first Spider-Verse movie here, where Miles, like, his animation is a little janky, but as the movie progresses and he becomes more confident, he becomes more fully animated. Spot in this movie is like half finished. You can see like the pencil outlines on his character.
I noticed that.
And as the movie progresses, he fills in more and like becomes more like full featured, like an actual piece of animation.
Fully fleshed out.
Yeah. And I mean, he kind of takes a back seat, but he's definitely becoming like a main, like, he's going to be the villain of the third film. Just seeing his transition here was really fantastic. I loved that villain, and something I don't think I've actually ever heard of the Spot before.
Nor have I.
And I think I'm always impressed by the ability for these writers to take like the lesser known villains who don't get a lot of presence, don't get a lot of attention, and elevate them to something that's really credible and really fascinating. Is just so amazing. And this one, it was just incredible.
Yeah, I love what they did with the character. It was like kind of goofy. There's a great scene in when they go to Mumbattan, which is like the Indian, with the Indian Spider-Man, and that Spider-Man makes some kind of quip about another white guy coming to India or the Middle East, to the East, trying to find himself. And Spot's like, no, I didn't mean it like that.
Yeah.
Trying to find meaning. It's like, even the bad guy doesn't want to be perceived as racist. It's like, that's interesting. It's like, he's trying to like collapse entire universes to try and get revenge against Miles Morales. But he's like, but I'm not racist. But yeah, like all the banter back and forth, the action with the portals and everything. So incredibly inventive, the different ways they found to like those action scenes too. I had to go back, because like he would put a portal as like one spider person was punching him, and then that would punch another spider person. So it was like turning them against each other kind of. So yeah, I had to watch that 2 or 3 times just to wrap my head around. There's so much going on. An amazing villain with a great personal connection. It's not just about the obviously ending universes is bad, but in order for audiences to care about a story like this, you have to have that, what are the personal stakes for the character? And the Spot wants to make Miles suffer like he feels Miles made him suffer with that accident at the lab, and the bagel, which apparently bagels are part of the multiversal mythos now, no matter what you're in. I don't know if that was like a nod to Everything Everywhere All at Once or not.
Right?
But he's like, no, I'm going to make you suffer. I'm going to kill your dad, who's becoming a captain. So it ties in with a canon, but it also is like, okay, these are personal stakes where it feels like anybody, can put themselves in that position. Like, yeah, sure, world-ending stakes, but on something on a scale that big, the world is ending. It's hard to imagine that, right? It's hard to connect with that as a person, to imagine something so big. But you say like, oh, I'm gonna kill your dad, or I'm gonna kill your loved one. It's like, oh, all of a sudden I can understand that. I can understand when he's tied up at the end by his alternate universe self, who's the Prowler, and he's like, I need to get out of here to save my dad. And you can feel like I was tense. It's like if my parents were in danger, or if my family was in danger and I was tied up, it's like, I'm going to do everything within my power. I'm not going to let anybody stand in my way. If I can help it, I'm going to get there and I'm going to save my family. That's how you build empathy with a character and keep the audience engaged. Like, it was such a great balance between the world ending and the personal. Just incredibly well done.
So good. Anything else to throw in there?
I mean, like Haley Steinfeld as Ghost Spider / Spider Woman / Spider Gwen. She does a fantastic job. I didn't realize she was in the True Grit remake. I was trying to figure out. Finally looked up where she was from, and then she was in Pitch Perfect 2. She was the new girl coming in. It's like, oh, okay. I can visualize her now. Shamik Moore as Miles Morales. Amazing job as nailing that. There's a specific voice acting for somebody like 15, 16 years old who's in that transitional period. Dude just nails it. Karan Soni, who plays the Indian Spider-Man. He was, I think, the taxi driver from Deadpool.
Oh, yes.
So it's nice to see him getting kind of front and center work. Andy Samberg was the Ben Reilly version of Spider-Man.
Yeah, love that.
I think we mentioned Donald Glover already, and we mentioned Oscar Isaac.
You got to mention Jake Johnson.
Jake Johnson was back again as Peter B. Parker.
Yeah.
It was great with his spider baby.
Miles's mom.
Yeah, who played his mom?
Luna Lauren Velez, I believe.
Okay.
And
she did a great job as well. The parents, who played his dad?
The father, Jeff Morales, Brian Tyree Henry.
Nice. Oh, and Mahershala Ali was back as Uncle Aaron / he was the Prowler in the Miles original universe, but he's not anymore in this one. So he passed the mantle to alternate Miles here.
I mean, you got J.K. Simmons showing up there as a voice at one point. I don't know if it was just from like archival footage, but
yeah, it's from the Lego Spider-Man segments.
Yes,
which is another great universe, and I think it was him in the background there. Yeah,
and Jack Quaid who played Peter Parker version that turned it like Gwen's Peter Parker, who turned into Lizard.
Oh, that was Jack Quaid. Oh,
Jack
sweet.
Quaid. Rachel Dratch playing the I think it was the high school counselor.
I recognized her immediately.
Yeah,
she's got that
she's awesome.
Very recognizable voice, right?
Oh my goodness, it was just like I feel like the list goes on and on. I mean, especially when they pull in voices from the previous Spider-Man.
Oh yeah,
I don't think they had like necessarily new lines, but it was just nice to hear. All of them sort of show up there and like being teased at the end is coming back.
It's like, more. Oh yeah, so Nick Cage confirmed for number 3 because they brought back Spider-Man Noir. Is he coming back? Amazing stuff. Yeah, shout out to the voice cast. It was amazing.
So I think you kind of alluded to it earlier, unless you have anything else to add before we get into ratings here.
No, Your Honor, the defense rests.
Fair enough. You did allude to this a bit earlier, I think. The your rating on this movie, where do you stand? And
overruled.
As always, we do the letterboxed rating system. A half star to 5-star option with a possibility for a special like bonus on top of that. What's your 5-star review or rating of Across the Spiderverse?
Right. So I gave Across the Universe 4.5 out of 5. As I said, for the ending, something just felt incomplete. But I also gave it the extra heart for the like. So
nice.
I don't know if that balances out that extra half star. I don't know. The like is just so amorphous and out there, but 4.5 out of 5 plus the like. Really, really great movie. I might bump it up to 5 stars eventually. Like, I mean, thinking about it now is like such a minor complaint. Have the ending. Either way, an exceptional movie.
Yeah. I mean, I still felt the same way. I was just like, I mean, you're kind of disappointed that there's a cliffhanger because you want more, right? But I'm also excited that there will definitely be more in the story. But it's like I did feel as though it's probably literally the only criticism I have towards the movie. It just didn't sit right with me with that. with that
Yeah, I
cliffhanger
think
ending. It's just like I needed a different finale.
you know
on
what?
it.
If I ever bump Dune up to 5, I'll bump this one up to 5 because I felt like it was the same issue I had with both movies. That was the only thing in the way
Yeah.
of keeping them being perfect. So like, I might watch Dune and Across the Spiderverse again and be like, it doesn't bother me that much anymore. They're 4.5, 5-star movie. They're both across the universe. Either way, like I'm gonna buy this as soon as it comes out. I had a blast watching this with my son again. It was just, even without my son, it was just like, I don't know. It was an incredible experience. How about you, Brian? I think we know where you're going with this. I took a quick. I don't usually do this, but I took a quick sneak peek at your Letterboxd ratings for this.
Oh, unbelievable! So I landed at 5 stars. It was a
Yeah.
very simple matter. I was thinking about that ending. I'm just like, was that 4.5? No, it was still. It's just a minor quabble I have with the movie. I'm not thinking about that. I'm fine with it. And this is a perfect 5-star movie. I mean, it's not a perfect movie, but it's a 5-star film. I didn't think about giving it the special the heart bonus at the end, just because I usually reserve that for movies I've seen a couple of times. But 100%, this is going to get the like. As soon as this comes out on disc, I'm buying the 4K version.
Oh yeah,
I'm gonna
4K
watch
for sure.
Into the Spider-Verse, and I'm gonna watch Across the Spider-Verse
As many times as you can, as fast as you can.
and I'm gonna give both of them 5 stars. And I hope that we get, we don't have to wait 4 or 5 years for that third one. I have a feeling we will, and I want them to take their time. I don't want to see anyone like lose their sanity over like long hours animating this thing, but I also want them to spend time making sure every little detail is great, because that third movie has a huge expectation on it. Like, based on these 2 movies, this trilogy could be. I mean, if this third movie is like this is a 15 out of 15 stars across the trilogy, which is kind of a bit unheard of in some film worlds, I guess. But yeah, that's where we're at with Across the Spider-Verse.
Very few movies have that perfect, or very few trilogies have that perfect rating. I can only think of a couple off the top of my head that I would give perfect ratings to, and even those are kind of. It's always tough. It's always tough to get the.
Here's the other thing that happens when you watch a movie like this. Everything else is just trash. I went to see The Flash last week. Trash compared to this, right?
Is that a fair rating though?
It's not fair. No.
Fair comparison, rather.
That's the thing, but it's like they're all superhero movies, so it's just like they inherently fall in the same bucket. And you're like, everything that is coming out, any of these MCU movies coming out, DC, they're not holding a candle to something like this.
I think what Across the Spider-Verse does is show, it refutes that idea of people being burned out on superhero movies, comic book movies. It's about the quality of the product, regardless of whatever genre you're coming in. If you come with a good story, if you come in with that passion, where all of the people involved are kicking things up to a 10, in this case, the animators, the actors, the writers, everybody, the director, everyone's operating. This is a well-oiled machine. This is a high-end Lamborghini functioning at full capacity. It's like, when you put out quality goods, the problem with recent superhero output isn't that they're superheroes, isn't that they're based on comic books. It's that, like you said, they feel like they're corporate exercises. They feel like it's all kind of been homogenized, but you come along and you feel something like this, and the passion behind it and the feeling behind it is like, we're not fed up with comic book movies or superhero movies. We're just fed up with mediocre movies. You come out with a good movie in any genre, in any medium, live action or animated, you're going to get audiences showing up. You're going to get people engaged. And I think that's the key takeaway. Not the key takeaway, but a key takeaway from this movie.
And that's a wrap on another episode. As always, we appreciate you hanging out with us today and taking the time to listen to our podcast. We have a lot of fun putting these together and hope that you get some enjoyment out of them as well. You can find us online over at reelfilmchronicles.com, where we have not just a repository of podcast episodes, but many of our written reviews as well. If you're up to it, you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram as well. All the links should be within the show notes here. So until next time, take care of yourself and others, and be sure to enjoy your film journey.